Shalom, shalom. This video is about the Gospel of John chapter 6 and verses 60 to 66. It's about some disciples' prayer of objection and disgust against Yeshua's hard teaching. And we were leading up to this. I think the highlight was yesterday, but for a couple of days. I'll read the text for you. John 6 verse 60 to 66. So when many of his disciples heard this, and this refers to the so-called hard teaching, to eat Yeshua's flesh and to drink his blood, they said, "This is a hard teaching, who can listen to it?" But Yeshua knew his disciples were murmuring, so he said to them, "Does this offend you? Then what if you see the Son of Man going back up to the place where he was before? It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh is of no benefit. The words I've spoken to you are spirit and are life. Yet some of you do not trust." Yeshua knew from the beginning who were the ones who did not trust, who did not have faith in him, as well as which one would betray him. Then he told them, "For this reason I've told you that no one can come to me unless it's been granted to him by the Father." And from this time many of his disciples left and quit walking with him. Of course, the disciples who left were not part of the core, they were the riffraff. Some people who were identified as disciples, but not part of the 12, murmured against Yeshua's hard teaching. That relates to the elements of the communion, as we considered in the previous number of prayers and videos that I talk about it, that reached its height in yesterday's portion. And their prayer of objection and disgust was, "This is a hard teaching, who can listen to it?" And then those murmurers quit walking with him and they left. This was winnowing. The chaff was blown away by the wind, by the ruach in Hebrew. It was a refinement or a purification, except for the odd one out who still remained, so that he would become the betrayer later on. Earlier in the hard teaching that sifted the disciples, Yeshua told them to eat his flesh and to drink his blood. Now to the disciples who remained, he explained that his words were spirit. That means he spoke metaphorically. I tried to make this point in my previous video discussion, but I'm not as eloquent as Yeshua is. The murmurers take us back to the Exodus 16 parallel, where people murmured and grumbled against Adonai, against Moses, and against Aaron. But because I highlighted it a couple of days ago, I'm not going to bore you with the same again, except to say that these verses in John 6 are the Exodus 16 prophecy about the bread from heaven fulfilled. In manna, of course, back in the Exodus, and ultimately in Adonai Yeshua, the prophet like Moses, who also is our high priest. The perplexing part of Yeshua's response in these verses are, "Does it offend you? Then what if you see the Son of Man going back up to the place where he was before?" Yeshua clearly refers to his ascension in this, and I wonder how that can be offensive. The ascension proved that Yeshua first came down from heaven, as he alluded to in this passage. The Hebrew word aliyah, is the original language for ascent or to ascend. It simply means going up, and for Jews in diaspora, aliyah refers to the return to the promised land, but aliyah also means the pilgrimage to Jerusalem to attend Adonai's Moedim, or the appointed times. And there's absolutely nothing offensive about that. So I went to the Christian commentators and I looked at the large number of them. Some of the Christian Bible commentators wrote that the act of ascending to heaven was seen as offensive, even blasphemous. But I find it hard to swallow. The pulpit commentaries speculate that it relates to Yeshua's resurrection and not to his ascension, because John does not make mention of the ascension in his gospel, at the end of the gospel. But the question now is, how is the resurrection then? How can that be offensive? And that question remains unanswered. I think maybe the Cambridge Bible for schools and colleges, their approach to interpret it, and their interpretation was, would you then still be offended by me saying I came down from heaven? That means if you see me ascending, would you still be offended because I said that I came down? And that's probably the most correct of all the commentaries in this regard. Yeshua's statement that no one can come to him unless it's been granted to him by the Father also tends to reignite the predetermination debate. Please remember that the doctrine of predetermination is a false doctrine, and I explored that a couple of days ago, so I'm not going to go there again. The Father used the Spirit to convict us of sin and our need for salvation. If and when anyone comes to faith in Yeshua after being so convicted by the Spirit sent by the Father, he will be saved. But the people who follow Yeshua for a free meal and for being entertained by his works, those people are not granted by the Father, but they follow out of their own folly, and those will not know him at all. Christian custom and culture amounts to nothing, as Yeshua seeks a personal faith relationship with each and every true disciple. And I hope that will give you some food for thought. Shalom, shalom.